Folks, welcome inside the Casa Clark house, the studio of Mike Clark. Such an honor to be joined by an individual who's been keeping the timeless rhythms of melodic improvisation on the bandstand for many, many years, and he continues at a prolific rate today. Mike Clark, welcome to the Jay Feinberg Show.
Thank you, Jake. Appreciate it. I'm honored to be here.
Well, it's an honor to have you, my brother. Can you talk about playing with Donald Harrison? Does he get into the Indian suit, the Mardi Gras Indian suit, when you play with him?
He does at times, yeah. I've had that experience with Donald quite a few times. We play mostly jazz together, or he'll come out with the Headhunters. And when he's out with the Headhunters and there's some funk going on, he definitely can access that experience, and it's magical and it's ridiculous. It's so funky, and he's so funky, and it lifts the spirit of the band so high that it's hard to find words. You'd have to be there, you know.
Absolutely. No, this is what leading into it though is I just wanted to know the first sort of spiritual experience. I hate the word jazz, but you've played with all the masters, Bobby Hutcherson, Woody Shaw, all the cats. Can you talk about when you realized that it was much more than just music? There's spiritual music.
I think at one point when I was playing with Woody Shaw and Bobby Hutcherson, I was quite young, and I was quite stoned, quite frankly.
That's great.
During that time period, being very honest, and I realized that at one point when we were playing, I was trying to show what I knew,
mm-hmm.
and trying to show how hip what I'd been listening to and where I was coming from. I was putting my concept across rather than connecting with the musicians on the stage, and nobody had to tell me because I can see right where I was sitting right now when it happened. Woody was standing right to the left of me, and I realized I'm not connecting here. I'm not living inside these other guys' souls. I'm presenting what I know, and it's a drag. And once I realized that, I immediately tried to affect change. And then what I realized is, in order to connect with another human being's soul, purifying one's heart is of the utmost importance. Now that may sound soupy and whatever,
hippy dippy trippy. I dig it, man.
You get it?
I dig it.
You feel me? Because at the end of the day, you want to be.
Did you know just by body language or the fact that you weren't connecting with the soul, or was it just something internally inside you or was it an actual feeling on the bandstand that you knew you weren't getting where you needed to go?
The latter, the last thing right there. I was feeling the disconnect, and I was feeling the fact that I wasn't playing inside each other. I wasn't playing inside the other musician's brain, is the way I like to put it. Like I was not a conversational drummer. I was playing hot and I was playing good, and I was playing, but it was about me and not the collective thing, and so I realized that was not cool.
Mike, how do you work with you have a bunch of projects, we'll get into them going on right now, but how do you work with cats today who were in the same position you were back in the 60s with Bobby and Woody? How do you get them to become aware of getting inside the brain, the telepathic stuff, without coming down too hard on them where you crush them?
You mean, well, most of the guys I play with go there like from note one. I'm serious.
No, I know you. No, I'm actually talking about, are there younger cats you play with that don't lock in minute one?
Well, I feel it when it's not happening like that, and I don't say, to tell you the truth, I found that, not that I have it all going on, but leading by example is better than trying to say, hey, buddy, da-da-da-da-da. But if there is a little verbal
exchange,
back and forth about the subject, I'm not afraid to speak up, but I don't do it heavy-handed. Like a lot of guys when I was young scream and yell and threatened and all kinds of stuff, what I went through at that time, and I'm not complaining. it was good for me. But I'm not that kind of person. You know, I'd have to. I'm not that guy.
What leading by example for a non-musician watching worldwide? What is leading by example?
Well, I say if I'm playing, I'm communicating, I'm swinging, and all of my ducks are fairly well in a row. You're never going to get all the. I'm never going to have all the T's crossed and I's dotted. But if it's got a good feeling, if it feels good to me and it feels good to the band, it's going to feel good to the people and elevate them. You know, if I like it, they're probably going to like it.
I want to get you on the record on this. How responsible are rhythm sections for creating new musical vocabulary? Are they solely responsible for it? Or I mean, and could you give a cite a time when in a rhythm section when you, at least, Ron Carter said that you can help drive it, you can set the table for it, but you're not solely responsible for it. Stanley Clarke would say that rhythm sections in history are responsible for creating new musical vocabulary. What does Mike Clarke say?
I think everybody on the stage is responsible for that. I want to be as responsible as I possibly can, so in case somebody doesn't come up to that level, that I can help out from where I am. You know what I mean? So the more vocabulary one has, the more people you can allow into your life. Meaning you don't have to play a certain style. You can accommodate quite a few styles because you have the language and the vocabulary, so people can speak to each other while you're playing, because not everybody's been listening to the same thing all their lives, and people make left turns and start digging something else, and so the more you know, the better it is. At the end of the day, I've heard another very famous bass player say, the soloist is entirely determines how much or how little the rhythm section can get to play. And Herbie says something like that to me also, but he may have changed. That was back in, who knows, 75 or the covered wagon days. I think everybody has to be.
Well, this is really interesting. So flesh that out. I mean, like, because you listen to some cats and they have so much space in the music that I guess it does, as far as the horn player, the lead improvisationalist, they allow so much space for the rhythm section to play. Whereas other people are just blowing so much and they have so many ideas that you're just kind of keeping time. Is that what you're getting at?
Well, if it's swinging and a guy's playing a whole lot, and I would find myself getting in his way by trying to accompany him in the conversation, then I'm happy to just swing, and I don't feel put upon. I don't feel like, oh man, I just have to play time. If it's swinging, it's all good, whether you're whether you're throwing everything in but the kitchen sink, or if you're just playing one-handed. That, to me, is the great sensation. It's like going down the hill of a roller coaster. You know, it's physical as well as emotional, and intellectual part comes if you can really get into the conversation. But I don't do it at the other's expense. It is a bit boring if you play with a guy that every time he solos, he only hears himself and he plays everything he knows. That's sort of like going to somebody's house and their little poodle tries to get off on your leg. You know what I mean? It's like, that can be a bit much. But
it gets real tiring out. It's a drag after a minute.
Well, it can be. Yeah, it's like if it's swinging, I'm cool, but after a while, it's like, bro, like the rest of us are here too.
Well, that's the thing. It's like, is there a conversation? I mean, to me. Now. I want to be very clear. When you moved to Vallejo with your dad, you got a chance to play with Sly Stone.
No, I didn't move to Vallejo with my dad. I moved when I was in high school.
Yeah.
I went to a senior prom with my girlfriend and a bunch of my buddies and their girlfriends. We were all
having a ball.
Oh yeah, and Sly was playing with Bobby Freeman.
Bobby Freeman.
And Bobby Freeman, I had played one night with. Well, wait a minute. No, here's how it went. This was a long time ago. Excuse me. Later I played with Bobby Freeman. Anyway, here's the answer to the question. Right. One of my friends, I think it was a friend of mine named Greg Murphy, whose son is a hell of a bass player out in the West Coast.
What's his name?
Sean.
Sean Murphy. If he's watching, people are having on fire.
Trevor Murphy. Sean Murphy is another friend
Trevor
of mine.
Murphy, bass player.
Sorry, Trevor.
No, it's all right.
Those are big dudes, too. They're going to be mad
No,
at me
people
for
are having a
this.
ball. You're making their
Sean
day-to-day,
Murphy.
right? Yeah.
No, Sean Murphy is a dear friend. I'm sorry.
Sly.
I think Greg, went up to the bandstand, and there was a Dixieland traditional kind of drummer playing drums, and he wasn't cutting it when they had a old school dance band there, and when Sly and Bobby came in, he wasn't cutting it, and I think Greg Murphy, whose son Trevor Murphy is a great bass player, there we go, asked Sly or one of those guys, hey man, why don't you have our drummer play from school, this guy? And so we played the Swim, Betty Lou's Got a New Pair of Shoes, and Do You Want to Dance in Some Kind of Blues, and Sly was, I believe Sly was playing guitar.
Really?
I think so. And that's how that went. Later on, I did a few hits with Bobby at the Condor Club in San Francisco. Excuse me.
Yeah, no, it's fine. I mean, was Sly even a DJ at that point? I mean,
he was a DJ at that point. I didn't know who he. I knew him from the radio. I forget the call letters of that station, but yeah, he was a DJ. There was no Sly and the Family Stoner, and this is way before that. But I think he produced the Swim for Bobby, and he was,
And he was playing guitar.
I think it was guitar. Yeah.
How much do you feel like today your viability to be hired for gigs with all these cats? Like you lock in telepathically with these guys minute one, but when you go back in time, how grateful are you to be on those R&B circuits with the old wily veterans like Delbert McClinton, the bar gigs, the blues? I mean,
Excuse me.
Yeah, I mean, do you feel like your viability today is strong because of the roots of where you came from?
Well, I didn't come from rhythm and blues, but I did spend about 15 years there one night. You know what I mean? It was during the period you're talking about in my youth, and I just needed work, and I could. I was. I played traditional and Gene Krupa stuff as a child, and then I got into bebop, and I never thought about blues or funk. But at the time in the 60s, I could kind of translate the James Brown beats without practicing them. I could kind of just sort of knew what they were doing, and I guess I came pretty close. And that's why I got calls for those gigs. Now, at the same time, I left home when I was 16, so it was always about making the rent and having a car. I had to pay for that stuff and clothes. And so these guys were paying me pretty good. I think even in the 60s, I made $50 a night. In those days was good money.
That's rent for a month.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
And also I would, if you were on the road in those days, I think the common thing was, hey man, the gig pays $200 a week. And that was really something, you know what I mean? And
with lodging, or that was you were crashing in the truck?
No, I think we had to pay for our own hotel room.
Yeah. So,
I can't. It sure was fun. I was a kid. It was a blast.
But those weren't bebop gigs.
Those were not bebop gigs. No, those were like funk. They didn't even call them funk gigs.
That's what I love about you, man, because they did not have, the term was not in the lexicon.
No, neither was pocket and all of this stuff. I don't mind all those terms because we use them to understand what we're talking about. But yeah, those terms were not being used then. They used to say play something funky, and that usually meant play something like Horace Silver or Cannonball. It didn't mean Sam and Dave yet. That was coming up. That was just getting a lot of airplay. Otis. All those guys became real popular. So I played in a million bands in order to make rent, and I enjoyed the music. It wasn't that loud, and also you didn't have to play stupid fills. Nobody used the term fills. You could actually play somewhat on those gigs, and most of us were all jazz drummers. I don't recall meeting a real R&B drummer until later. Guys became specialized at this. Al Jackson was a jazz drummer. So, anyway.
I mean, I guess also the thing technically, did you learn playing simpler music? What do you still incorporate into your groove today that you learned on those R&B gigs? Because there's not a lot of language there. And some people would say it would be simple, but.
Well, if you have a singer that really knows how to shout and scream, and he's the real deal, then I'm cool with like laying back there playing the cut and knocking out a few fills or whatever is necessary. I don't have to. I don't feel the need to improvise on a gig like that. It would be inappropriate, I would think, unless it was pre-planned. In those days, the stuff that drummers played was the fusion thing wasn't there yet. So, like I say, they mostly had a jazz background. So most of the ideas that we played came from jazz history. It didn't come from R&B history was being made at that point.
That's really interesting. So could you give an example of an idea that you were incorporating in from jazz?
Well, guys would use Philly Joe licks with roughs and drags from the Wilcoxon to get licks around the set like that.
We're deep in the weeds right now. I love it, dude.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, and then you'd cut some of those down a little bit. Some of the Motown fills were one round of one of those licks. Just a short burst of that doom, and those kind of things like that. Philly Joe and those cats were playing stuff like that way back,
What years when you say way back? I mean, 40s?
Yeah, 50s.
50s.
And maybe, probably 40s too. Yeah, 40s, sure. Sid Catlett, actually, now that I think about it, yeah. And, but anyway, this thing about bash or all of these things that producers will talk to her about now as if they know. It's because that's what ended up on those records. So in those days when a band went to play, eventually you started copying the record note for note. That's when I bailed. I'm like, I can't do this,
Well, that was something. I mean, you talked about it after Manchild. You said, Herbie, we sound like a backup band. We need some singers, and you made a point, very salient point about the fact that once they started really commodifying major hits, drummers felt compelled to copy those beats, those exact licks. When you heard that, you went the other way. I mean, you were never going to be about that. But how did it affect music at that time? That's like mid-'70s. That's like Drum Machine. Also, you had people feeling compelled to copy what became a hit.
Well, to start with, I always only owned a bebop drum kit. I never owned a funk. Somebody gave me a funk drum set that sat in the closet, so when I go to the studio, they'd have a bass drum with no heads on it. Everybody seemed, and the tom-tom heads.
Love it, dude.
There was tons of tape on everything, and it seemed like everybody had the same studio sound, and everybody was playing similar ideas. And if you wanted to work, you couldn't go in there with an 18-inch bass drum and 2 K cymbals and start blowing your ass off. Man, you get thrown out. Believe me, I know because I did it.
Did you get thrown out of places?
Well, I was it was either don't do that or
gone.
Get it, or we have a cab waiting out there for you. Sure, man. Like
we got a cab for you.
Like the thing is like it was at that time that I knew I had to come back and play bebop or post-bop or some kind of jazz. I was losing my mind, and it's not for everybody. A lot of people would have loved to have that job I had, and I do appreciate it. But when it stopped. When the creative flow stopped for me, I thought I don't want to do this anymore. I don't care who the guy's name is. If it it doesn't matter. So I came back to San Francisco and lucked up on Eddie Henderson called me for a 5 night a week jazz gig at a place called Christo's that lasted for 1 year. Now, you can't get it any better than that. I was like, oh, yeah, thank you.
Going back to the bebop, I mean, how much it had to do with the fact that people, but I mean, going back to this thing, I mean, was it, how hard was it for you to relate to your peers, the drummers who were saying, who were playing licks that were being made, that were coming off of hits on the radio? They were no longer thinking for themselves as individual players. Everybody had their own sound back in the day. And then now you even had cats back then saying, well, that was a major hit. We got to play it. Or the producer was basically laying it down like that. Was it, I mean, did you feel like you were sort of just walking around with 3 heads? Or were there other people that were carrying the mantle as well?
All of my friends were jazz drummers except for Ray Torres, who was a genius drummer, period, no matter what he
Dave
played.
Soul Kitchen.
Yeah, exactly. And he was my best friend, but he was an expansive drummer. He could play anything. He could play whatever he wanted to play, you know. So, but I didn't really have many funk drummer buddies. I didn't look down on them or anything like that. It was just not where I was going. In fact, prior to Herbie's gig, I had my own organ trio, which was a jazz gig for 3 or 4 years.
Who was in that? Who was in that trio?
That was Arnold Young on organ and Dave Davenport on guitar, and we played.
Are those cats still around?
I'm sorry.
Are they still around?
They both passed. Yeah.
Wow.
Dave
You had an organ trio.
In the late 60s, right up until about 1970, and it was in a club called The Village. Now, this was in Vallejo, and we had 3 nights a week jazz gig and a Sunday, and finally we got a Sunday session. So it was a 4-night-a-week gig, and then I'd job all over the place in San Francisco and Oakland on the other nights. So, and I had that for 3 years. So that's where I learned about 8 billion standard tunes, and we were young, so we would copy whoever. We would try to play like all of our heroes, you know. And anyway.
And the organ player was kicking pedals?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I guess that maybe the better question is, how have you always maintained your artistry without compromise? I mean, again, it was always about paying rent for you.
It still
is. But it's fair to say, I mean, you played with George Cables, the man in his trio at Catano. You got a myriad of things. I mean, can you choose what you want to play now, or are you still saying, someone says, Mike, we got some avant-garde classical thing, and you're like, it pays really well, I got to take the gig. I mean, would you say that you still, can you just choose your art and still make a living?
Here's what I've done at this age. I do choose what I'm going to do. It's not that I can. I don't know whether I can afford to or not, but somehow it seems to work out. So,
well, it's been working out for a long time, so I guess it's working out.
I guess it's going to keep going as long as I keep going. But I just did Eddie Henderson's record, and we just did a festival in Poughkeepsie last weekend, I think, with Donald Harrison and a bunch of great guys. And I just did George Cable's thing at the Catano, and before that I played with Sonny Fortune at the Blue Note, and I have some of my own things. And today I'm recording with Leon Dorsey, a great bass player. He's got a great studio where he lives, and Greg Chaco is playing guitar. It's his date. I believe we're going to do some Monk tunes, and I guess they've freaked those tunes out even more than they are.
Yeah, I don't know how you're supposed to stretch it out. You play with Fontella bass?
I did not play with Fontella bass. I played with one time I played a track where Gratian Monker III played. He wasn't there.
Bone player?
Yeah, he played bass though, and he played.
He
bass.
played bass?
Yeah, I was who's on bass, and they went Gratian Monker III, and I said the same thing you did. I'm like, get out of here. Dude. And so I put some drums on a track. I think he was married to Fonta, or one of the guys from the art ensemble was married to Fontella bass.
We'll have to throw that out there. Who was married to Fontella bass? So you laid down a track for one of her albums? Or?
No, she had nothing to do with it. That's the closest I came to. But I was a Fontella bass. I dug Fontella bass. You know, is what it was.
Dug Fontella?
Oh, big time. I mean, was it Rescue Me? Was that? Yeah. And so, but I did do a ton of soul shows, if you will, and different artists would come on and play with whatever. I would be in the local R&B band, and we would back up different people, and I backed up like, I can't even remember, there were so many of them, really, you know what I mean?
Did you ever get a chance to play behind Aretha?
No. Mm-mm.
Rest in peace.
That would have been cool. I would have loved to do that. A good shuffle or something, you know what I mean?
I mean, what is your, how do you see the future of melodic music? Where do you? What's the cutting edge? What do you hear? What do you see? You're on the ground a lot more than I am. I'm on the road a lot, but I've seen some really fantastic stuff coming from the older guard lately. A lot more, almost theatrical kind of color, awash in colors, beautiful stuff that you've experienced. I don't know if that's cutting edge or not, but I just wonder if there's. I often talk about the the break in the lineage of the music somewhere, that cats maybe don't go back far enough, younger cats, and there's a lot of different theories about that. But I just wonder what you see as sort of the new cutting edge of melodic improvisation. Some people would call that jazz.
Well, that's a great question. There was for me, from my level of understanding, I would say my opinion is there was a break in the lineage, and a lot of guys were signed to deals without really having done a lot of homework, and you could hear it. That doesn't mean it wasn't good. It just means you're like, what's missing? Oh, finally I've realized, that's what's missing, some history, and not, it takes a long time to develop that language. So I'm older, so it's taken me a lot. I'm still working on it. It's not developed yet. I still feel like I've left huge parts out. I'm like, well, what about this and what about? But as far as where it's going, I do hear some. I think the tendency that was going on for a while of showboating and, like, let's say drummers, because I'm a drummer, of playing 1,000,000 ideas all over the set, playing as fast as they can. I think people are tired of that, and I think we're getting back to something. I'm not sure where it's going, but I do hear some really great young talent and some guys in their 40s and stuff that are really playing. I'm not going to go into who, but I go around New York and I pop into clubs and I hear some really good forward-thinking stuff,
And it feels good.
It feels, it does to me. I mean, sometimes, if a guy is, look, when I was 25 years old, I was playing all the main gigs out on the West Coast, and I wasn't fully developed. So I can't expect a guy at 25 to know, to slander him. Well, he's fast, or he's good, or except he doesn't do this. I don't talk like that anymore. I've been through that where I was jealous of people, and you can't earn a penny counting your neighbor's wealth, Herbie Hancock used to say, so there's no use going there. So I admire the young talent, the people who are really good and have some good ideas that are shocking and go against the grain. Hell yeah, change it. But I think my generation, we tried to add on to the change coming from what we heard before. I didn't look down on my elders, I idolized them. And I got to meet a lot of them, and then I realized why I idolized them. It was more than the drumming or the piano playing or the saxophone playing. It was they were world travelers, and they developed a huge inner world, and I think that's what I was attracted to. I sort of changed the subject here, but
that's fine.
Yeah, I hear a lot of great stuff.
Well, no, I mean, I think that the truth is that you were not as you were raw at 25, but you were playing every night.
Well, true.
And so you were figuring out kind of, intuitively, instinctually, how to find your own individual sound. How did, when did you first connect with Vince Guaraldi?
Vince Denham, a tenor player.
I got to still talk to that cat.
Yeah,
he's a monster, dude.
Oh man,
yeah.
Forget it, totally.
Vince Wallace too. There's another.
I remember Vince Wallace.
Yeah, dude, he was playing with Kent Glenn, man. He has an album.
Kent Glenn's another one.
Well,
Vince Wallace's name was Vince Gambino. Check that out.
Love that. Yeah, I love the Gambino.
Yeah.
Anyway, no. So Denham was like, Guaraldi's playing in Berkeley or something.
Yeah, he was playing with Guaraldi, and he told Vince, "Have Mike come over to your house. There's a drummer that's kind of playing." In what at that time was considered a modern style, meaning I was trying to understand what Tony Williams was doing. I was trying to understand Bitches Brew. I was heading in that direction at that point. And so I went over and played with Vince, and he hired me right on the spot. And I played with him on and off for 10 years, and he was really an interesting guy, man. And
Can you share a good story about what a classic guy he was? Because just for younger cats, that might be watching this long after we're gone. I think that
I'm going to tell you this. He had a great sense of humor. He could play kind of like Wynton Kelly. He had that heavy swing when he wanted to. He didn't sound like a quote unquote West Coast, if you will, piano player of that time period. Now it doesn't matter what coast you go to. There's a lot of bad cats. Things have changed.
Right. I totally dig what you're saying.
Yeah. But in those days, he could put a hard hook in it if he wanted to, much harder than what he did on Cast Your Fate and stuff like that. but he had the worst temper of anybody I've ever met in my life, and we all loved him. Everybody, he was a lovable cat and a good guy, but man, I'm telling you, man, this dude would explode. And he would go from 0 to 120. Yeah,
and I mean, I know that feeling. It's not good.
No, and then then he would come back down just as fast, and then he would always make jokes about it, you know. And I really loved Vince. He was a great guy, man, a one of a kind, a classic, you know.
And when just for the audience who's listening out there, you know, you see all this manufactured music now. You see music that's made, and then it's, you know, it's put into some, you know, Sirius XM, or, you know, it's blasted out. But I mean, for you, this is how amazing music was at one time. Regionally, you'd go into Wally Hyder's or wherever you were, Fantasy, you'd cut those albums, the Charlie Brown albums, and then you're home watching TV and you're hearing yourself on local television playing that music. You know? I mean, that stuff was made regionally, and those specials that came out, you would hear it directly off your TV. That was you. It wasn't machine parts, that's for sure. To me, it just gave a whole new gratification to the idea of playing. It must have made the world seem a little bit smaller. We're all interconnected now because of these things I'm holding right now, but it must have been a trip.
Well, it was a trip in two ways. First, it was like, wow, that's me. And then I would hear the flaws, and I'd be like, oh, God. And then...
that's part of the beauty of it. It wasn't late. There weren't 40 layovers. It wasn't just all...
Oh, no, you just did what you did and went home. And also, Paul Jackson and I recorded the original God Make Me Funky. I've told this story a lot. For Everett and Jones Barbecue out on 14th Street, we lived next door. And she said, if you boys record a tune for me and I can play it on KDIA while advertising the food, I'll feed you free for a month or two. And we're like...
Deal.
Total.
Deal.
And it's straight up. We wrote it right there waiting for our ribs on a napkin, and went down to a guy named Ray Dobar's Soul City and recorded the original God Make Me Funky. And when people started hearing it, it was so funky. When people started hearing it on the radio, they're hearing the advertisements for the food, they would be calling in going like, what's that song? It's killing. What is that song? And I remember hearing that. I had a big Cadillac, you know, and I was driving down the 80, I guess it is, out there, highway, whatever, Nimitz Freeway used to call it, by the airport. And I was on KDIA, had a station on KDIA, and all of a sudden there we were. And now that really I dug. I was, you know.
Did you, what are you still learning about as you traverse along in your musical career? And I mean, I guess it's just very empowering to know that you're not only playing maybe at one of the highest levels. I mean, we're talking about George Cable's playing at the highest level he's ever played at, really, you know, arguably. I saw him the other night. But you're still learning. What are you learning about? Is it a humanistic thing? Is it, you know, vocabulary? Is it just appreciation? What are you still learning about?
Well, it's all of those. It's like definitely my humanity is growing because I work on it, you know.
You do a lot of chanting, right?
I'm a Buddhist,
yeah. Yeah, that's great.
Yes, and so I chant Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, and I get a twofold benefit out of that. One of it is like stirring a glass of water that looks clear, but when you stir it, the sediment comes up. So you do get to see what you need to change, but you have the power to change it. It actually does change.
That's perfect, yeah.
Yeah, so, and also, you know, more language, not so much more chops. There are some technical things I work on, but it's not speed and stuff. It's like maybe Latin rhythms or Afro-Cuban things I don't know. I work on things I don't know. I'm always working on how to make my ride beat nastier and funkier. Always trying to think of another way to spit this thing out and to make. You know, I don't feel like I've ever mastered that, and so I don't know if one ever does. I got a pretty wicked groove. I feel I've heard it enough on record to know it's pretty good. But I'm always trying to get it more something. And I'm also taking lessons with a great drummer named Joe Bonadito. And he's teaching me how to read at a high level. My reading has always been, I recognize so many groups of figures that without really understanding the mathematical thing that I could if I could either pick the figures off the page by repetitive, seeing them so many times and using instinct and enough bullshit to get by.
That's right.
And then finally I went like, you know what, this is not good enough. And I've been getting away with this and sometimes not getting away with it. So let me call a guy that can read anything they put in front of him. And that would be Joe, who was also totally funky and can swing his ass off. So it's fun to take a lesson with a guy like that. So he's teaching me, and I'm getting the benefit out of it. I'm actually learning things about when I look at figures now. I'm seeing a whole different layout than I used to. You know what I mean? So I should have done this when I was 15, like most people did, but I was working, and in those times I even played big bands, and a lot of times you did not get charts. They'd be like, hey, you'll hear it, or it was a bassy chart that was fairly not a lot of writing going on. You know what I mean?
I mean, cats like Denny Sywell, they talk about being in these bands with Al Cohn, Zoots, big bands in the Poconos, and someone would say they'd write a pair of glasses, like right on, keep a lookout. There's a big change coming here.
Something's happening.
Sort of subtle things, arrows and things, but it wasn't like you're straight reading, but you're really diving deep into the reading part of it.
I am. I mean, Joe had told me by the time he gets done with me, I'll be like an official sight reading dog that can just walk in and burn up whatever you put in front of me. Now that would be it's a cool challenge, and I'm enjoying doing it. It doesn't feel like labor. It feels like, wow, my brain is learning something new here.
Yeah, you're challenged, and it's fun.
And it's fun, yeah. It's cool, you know what I mean? And then, and it's helped me immensely. I see a huge improvement, and it does something to my attitude, too. I have more power while looking at a piece than I used to.
Oh, I dig.
Anyway, so it's kind of cool. It's more than kind of cool. I'm enjoying that. And I try to keep my hands loose by warming up, but I don't work on how fast I can, how high I can jump, and doing a 9.5.
You've done that.
I did that already. I'm done. It's over. I'm enjoying the groove too much to be bothered with all that right now.
You've been a big supporter of my program, and on one of my forums, you chimed in that you played in an avant-garde trio with Keith Godshow.
I did.
God,
you remember this?
Well, no, I just saw you write it in, and I'm like, well, I need to talk to him about that because Deadheads are going to freak out about that.
I did. I knew Keith from high school. I think we went to different high schools together,
really?
But we both were musicians, and we were I worked a lot in high school, a lot of gigs.
In Vallejo? Or
no, all over Northern California, everywhere. Yeah, and we all had, I could afford a nice car so I could drive to the damn gigs, and I met Keith. We played a few little things as 16-year-old together, and then one time we went over to some guy's house, Craig Randall, I believe, a bass player. Jeez, I don't know where that came from. I couldn't even remember. Washington Heights, by the way, is the name of this neighborhood.
Washington Heights.
Sorry. And how did I not know where I lived?
We're in New York.
Keith Randall, Craig. So we were playing. Yes. We were playing avant-garde stuff, and Keith played piano, and Keith and I did some straight-ahead gigs where it was standards trio, and I knew him quite a while there for a minute, and then we just sort of split, went different ways, and remained.
He was a brilliant player, too.
Oh, man, he's a great cat, too. I mean, even when he was a high school guy, he had all these ideas, and he was very serious.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I don't give him enough credit, actually. But, all right, so I'm just going to go through, I'm going to give you a name, and then I want you to give a free association, one word, when the name comes to your head.
Oh, Lord. Okay, I'll try. I'll do my best. All right.
First name, George Marsh. Describing their style, or what comes to mind, George Marsh.
Creativity.
Gregorico.
Funk.
Was there funk? Was the name was that name in the lexicon of music? Was that attributed to, like, when you start with Rico's a great funk drummer when he was with Sly? Was that when that?
I can't remember. I think maybe we. I was totally submersed in the jazz scene at that point. When he got on the scene, I was way underground in the whole jazz.
You were way underground, but still still there. Right?
Oh, I was still there. I was part of the community. Yeah, I think we'd say stuff like, "Man, that guy was Sly is funky." You know what I mean? Like stuff like that. I didn't know his drumming that well, other than those records. I only met Greg once in my life, and this was like in 1990 something. You know.
Beautiful cat. And David Garibaldi.
Okay, now that's...
You can stretch out. It doesn't have to be one word.
Well,
Talk
okay.
about your relationship with Garibaldi. I mean, you know...
Well, I love David Garibaldi. He's a brilliant artist, and he came up with those things that he came up with based on the roots have lasted the rest of us a lifetime who dabble in those in that style of playing, you know, the funky stuff and trying to be ultra syncopated and coming up with some ideas. Totally funky, totally brilliant, a gentleman, all of the great things one could, and a great drummer, and a great musician, and a real artist.
Michael Shreve.
A great guy, and a groundbreaking drummer. I didn't realize. Because at the time that Santana was popular, then I heard about the Woodstock thing,
Right.
And I met Michael a couple of times, and I just kind of figured that maybe he played good time, and then I saw a video later of him playing at that same time period, and he was playing like some Elvin-inspired ideas, and it was smoking, man, and smoking, and I'm like, and I didn't find this. I love you, Michael. I'm sorry, I didn't
He's tuning
know this
in, dude.
then.
Yeah, he's having a ball.
I didn't know this then because we didn't hang out very much.
I tend to think that you were like hanging with everyone, but I mean, I realized it was just a neighborhood.
I'd see him at SIR now and then, and I'd see him with Lenny, and we'd say hello, and I knew he was a good drummer. God, there's no doubt about that. But man, he was playing some really futuristic stuff when he was back then, and I discussed it with Lenny a little while ago. I was like, man, I saw this thing with Michael. And Lenny was like, oh yeah, he was like that all the time, and I'm like, geez, where was I? I mean, you
got hip to very. I mean, I guess before my phone battery dies, I just want you to talk to the. Is that a cell phone or is that a?
That's my cell phone.
Okay, we got to go. I wasn't sure there's a dog at the door, dude.
Yeah, no.
We're in Washington Heights, by the way. Why is it vital? Why was it important for individual style? The fact that you started as a jazz drummer and then wound up in funk. We talked about this before. Where people were funk drummers and then they go into jazz, but yours came before. Everyone, you were steeped in jazz and then immersed yourself in quote unquote funk. I think How did that? Why is that important for if you feel like that's the path that drummers should take?
Oh, I don't know if that's I think it's my age. I was at a time when there was no funk, or you didn't play Elvis Presley tunes when you went on a gig, or Little Richard tunes, or you played standard tunes. You played dances with organizations that were like Cop and Basie, or even Glenn Miller, or and then all,
like Woody Herman tunes.
Yeah, and on the side we all were sneaking in our bebop stuff and. So this is the 50s I'm talking about. You know what I mean? So there, the stuff that I listened to was all bebop, and before that it was big band and traditional. It was my father's record collection that started this whole thing, and there was a drum set in the house always. But I don't say that. That's the way.
No, what I'm saying is, you said before you were able to get these James Brown syncopation things going almost effortlessly because of your background.
Yeah, well, it took more at that time. It took more technique to play quote unquote jazz than it did to play rock. Now it's not that way anymore, so I'll get everybody will be mad.
Get torched on that. Yeah,
we did.
Dig.
And because I had a jazz musician's technique, I could easily translate those beats without even hardly.
That's what I'm getting at.
Yeah, it just seemed to happen natural for me, and I kind of knew how they were getting the snare sound, and when I went and I played with some guys that were playing that style, and it fit perfect right away. They thought this was the only thing that I did. They didn't even know I played jazz.
Really?
Yeah.
So, but it's the translation part of it that's the key. Maybe that's where the lineage broke down, is the fact that there.
I think people are talented in a lot of different ways. I mean, I know drummers that can instinctively almost play the correct clave and Latin stuff without really knowing.
Absolutely.
And they just can do it. I can't. I'm like, what? And or I mean, it's different for everybody. But I think the time period that I grew up music was so important to me at that time. It was my lifeline to avoid the insanity and the trauma that was going on in my childhood, and it was all I had. So I would go in my room, close the door, and put jazz records on and play my drums to those records all day. You know what I mean? And even before I went to school, I'd get up, put on Max Roach or somebody, and blast off for a half hour or so before I went.
Like 5:36 in the morning before school.
Something like that, yeah.
Unbelievable.
So I'd be really like elevated when I got to school. I was in a whole other place, you know, like, I guess, you know.
How do you bring love to the world, Mike Clark?
I'm constantly working on putting my anger in a place where I can use it for. We all have anger, so it's not like I'm this angry dude walking around. You know, it's not. But it's anger, and I seem to have my share of it. I guess we all do.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah, and so.
How does it manifest? How can you deal with it?
Well, I'm trying to find a way, and I think to channel it. Well, of course, I chant for. I think at this point with my music and my life, if I can find a way to help others or do something great or make somebody feel great about themselves, that's my contribution. Whether it's on the stage or going to the grocery store. I got in trouble when I was younger. I had my share of street action based on my anger. I didn't know how to.
You get set off. Someone would set you off.
I used to, not like Vince Guaraldi. I couldn't hold a candle. Who's that guy?
Dude, I would love to see.
Let me tell you a quick Vince Guaraldi story. Check this out.
Dude.
Hey Vince, wherever you are, man.
People are having a ball.
All right, so he bought a brand new Ford Econoline van or something in the '60s, and we go to He played all these ski resorts, which really paid good.
Love it, yeah.
Oh, it was killing. It was ridiculous, and we had a great band. And so we go up there, and we get a flat tire, and we're on Donner's Pass, Lake Tahoe, or wherever the hell. I've forgotten where it is.
Absolutely, someone will chime in. Yeah,
and it's very dangerous, and we're on this little. We're off the road a little bit, and people are mad at us, and it's and he can't undo the lug nuts. And we had this big guy that was helping us, a big monster guy, and he couldn't undo even when he stood on it and jumped on it, one of them was stuck, so we could have trouble. So Vince, everybody was blowing their horn and yelling at us because
So he was back. Everyone was getting backed up.
Yeah.
This is epic.
Totally.
Epic.
And we're all standing in front of the car trying to get this one last lug nut that won't get. And Vince took a tire iron and went and hit his own car right above the wheel well. I guess you call that the wheel. About 3 to 6 times. And then when he was done, and there was a dent, it was a brand new car. And afterwards, he had the thing in his hand, and he looked at us and smiled and went just like this, sorry. And we died. And then finally we got the tire changed, or here's another one. One time we're on the stage and we're playing this ballad. It's very pretty. We're in some real rich ski resort, huge crowd, utter silence to listen to him playing. We're playing this pretty ballad, and I did something. I hit a hi-hat or something with the handle of the brush. Somehow it was too loud. I didn't mean to do it. It was an accident, a physical.
Sure.
I reached over and went clank or something, and he got so mad he slammed the lid of the piano down. And then he put the lid of the piano back up and started playing. And now I'm mad. I've got the Italian temper on my mother's side. I'm only half Italian, but and I hit a rim shot as loud as I can. I was so mad. And he got up, and before the rim shot was done, he was all the way at the bar watching the band like this with a big smile on his face. And then he came back up. That's how his nervous system went. He finished the song, and after the set, he goes like, yeah, you got a little hot there, didn't you? I loved Guaraldi. What a guy, man. I mean, incredible. He got so mad when I went bang, bang. He ran off I didn't even.
Well, again, the original thing that teed him off was you made a mistake. It was a total mistake. So he had to go cool down for a minute. Then he came back up and he was playing to an aristocratic crowd. Do you try to make an impact in your world every day? Not even on the music stand. I mean, you're just trying to do good things for people, good nice things for people that are hurting, people that are down and out.
I do try to do that. It's not like I wake up and I'm so benevolent, but yeah, sure I do.
It's an organic thing. I get
Yeah.
it. Yeah, I mean, to me, it's like on top, if you can create Dharma, if you can create that Dharma, and that leads to better karma, and you're playing spiritual music, then your soul will never die, and that means your time on this planet in this life will go on for quite some time.
I'm trying to change the negative and accentuate the positive. You know what I mean? And that's, we both have the yin, not both, all of us have the yin and yang, and so I'm trying to...
Michael Shreve just chiming in. Thank Mike, having a ball seeing you, Michael.
Michael Shreve is hey Mike.
This is what the Jake Feinberg Show is about. Mike Clark, you got a great session today. I don't know how you're going to play more out than Thelonious, but
yeah, I don't think so.
But great to meet you in person. I look forward to catching you in action down the road, and it was an honor to hang with you, man.
My honor. Thank you so much. As always, Jake. Thank you. You're doing a great service by doing this and bringing us musicians that we all look. Every time I love reading and looking at. All
I dig, man. No, listen. This is about inspiring peeps. Trying to connect real humans through the digital medium. And you guys are the heroes. So
tell Michael Shreve.
He's listening.
Also, hey Mike, I called Lenny this morning about those tapes from the Both And Club, bro. That's real. Lenny said, "Yeah, I got it, but I got to look for him."
Wait, Michael double drums? Who's on?
No. Michael taped Lenny playing with Woody Shaw and those guys, or somebody, Freddie Hubbard, maybe.
Yeah.
At this club that we all used to hang
Both
out.
And.
Yeah.
Michael, let's get those tapes off the shelf, all right? No, Lenny's got them. Lenny's got them.
Yeah.
We got to get this stuff out. Anyway, Mike Clark, much love to you, man, and
Thank you, brother.
keep swinging, man.
Okay.
This is the Jake Feinberg Show. That's it from New York. We'll see you later.